In the golden light of ancient Egypt, in a time when the pharaohs were worshipped as living gods and the priesthood held dominion over the consciousness of millions, there existed a woman whose story has been deliberately erased from history, whose name has been struck from the records, whose very existence has been denied by those who sought to maintain absolute control over the narrative of power. This woman was known as the hidden daughter of the sun, and she possessed something far more dangerous than any weapon, far more threatening than any army. She possessed the eye of Ra, the divine sight that could perceive truth beyond illusion, the consciousness that could see through the lies upon which the pharaonic system was built. And she dared to use this sight to challenge the authority of the pharaoh himself, to question the divine right of kings, to suggest that power should be based on wisdom and service rather than on domination and control. This is her story, the story of the woman who defied the pharaoh and paid the ultimate price for her defiance. The story begins in the royal palace of Memphis, in the inner sanctum where only the most privileged members of the priesthood and the royal family were permitted to enter. In this sacred space, there was born a child who would change everything. This child was a girl, and she was born with a gift that marked her as extraordinary from the moment of her birth. The priests who attended her birth recognized immediately that she possessed the eye of Ra, the divine sight, the ability to perceive the hidden dimensions of reality that were invisible to ordinary consciousness. The eye of Ra was not a physical eye, though it was sometimes represented symbolically as such. It was a faculty of consciousness, an ability to perceive truth directly, to see through illusion and deception, to understand the deeper patterns and purposes that lay beneath the surface of events. It was a gift that had been possessed by the great prophets and the enlightened ones throughout Egyptian history, but it was a gift that was extremely rare, and it was a gift that was deeply feared by those who held power through the maintenance of illusion and control. The girl's father was a high priest of Ra, a man of great authority and influence within the priesthood. Her mother was a princess of the royal blood, a woman who had been chosen to bear a child who would carry forward the divine consciousness of the sun god. And so the girl was born into privilege, into a position of great honor and responsibility, into a role that seemed destined to make her one of the most powerful women in Egypt. But from the moment of her birth, it became clear that this girl would not follow the path that had been laid out for her. She possessed an independence of mind, a clarity of vision, a commitment to truth that could not be suppressed or controlled. As she grew, she began to use her eye of Ra to perceive things that others could not see, to understand things that others could not comprehend, to question things that others accepted without question. She perceived that the pharaoh, who was worshipped as a living god, was in fact a human being, with all of the limitations and the flaws of any human being. She perceived that the priesthood, which claimed to serve the divine will, was in fact serving its own interests, maintaining its own power, using the people's faith as a tool of control. She perceived that the entire system of Egyptian civilization, which was presented as the perfect expression of divine order, was in fact built on lies, on the suppression of truth, on the domination of the many by the few. And most dangerously, she began to speak these perceptions aloud. She began to question the authority of the pharaoh in the presence of the priests. She began to challenge the teachings of the priesthood with arguments that could not be refuted. She began to suggest that there was a different way, a way based on truth rather than on illusion, a way based on service rather than on domination, a way based on the awakening of consciousness in all people rather than on the control of consciousness by the few. Her father, recognizing the danger that her words posed to the established order, attempted to silence her. He tried to convince her to keep her insights to herself, to use her eye of Ra for the benefit of the priesthood rather than for the pursuit of truth. He tried to arrange a marriage that would bind her to the interests of the state, that would give her a role in which her dangerous insights could be contained and controlled. But the girl refused. She refused to be silenced. She refused to use her gift in service to a system that she knew to be built on lies. She refused to accept the role that had been assigned to her. And in her refusal, she became a threat not just to the priesthood, but to the Pharaoh himself, to the entire structure of power that held Egypt together. The Pharaoh, upon learning of this girl's defiance, understood immediately that she represented a danger that could not be tolerated. A woman who could see through illusion, who could speak truth with authority, who could inspire others to question the system, was a threat to the very foundation of pharaonic power. And so the Pharaoh issued a decree. The girl would be arrested. She would be brought before the court. She would be given the opportunity to recant her heresies, to submit to the authority of the Pharaoh, to accept the role that had been assigned to her. If she refused, she would be executed. The girl was arrested in the night, taken from the palace, brought before the Pharaoh in the great hall of judgment. And there, in the presence of the entire court, in the presence of the high priests and the nobles and the scribes who recorded everything, she was given her choice. She could submit, could accept the authority of the Pharaoh, could agree to use her gifts in service to the state, or she could refuse and face execution. The girl stood before the Pharaoh, and in that moment, something extraordinary happened. The eye of Ra that she possessed blazed with such intensity that everyone in the court felt it, perceived it, was affected by it. And she spoke words that would echo through the ages, words that were so powerful that they were immediately struck from the official records, words that were so dangerous that they could not be allowed to survive. "I see you," she said to the Pharaoh, her voice resonating with the authority of divine consciousness. "I see you as you truly are, not as the God that you pretend to be, but as a human being, limited and flawed, afraid of the truth, desperate to maintain power through the control of others. And I see that this system, this entire civilization that you rule, is built on a foundation of lies. The people are not meant to be ruled by fear and control. They are meant to be awakened to their own divine nature, to their own capacity for consciousness and wisdom. And I will not submit to your authority. I will not use my gifts to maintain your illusions. I choose truth, even if it costs me my life." Doom. The Pharaoh, faced with this defiance, with this clarity, with this refusal to be intimidated or controlled, made a decision that would become one of the most significant decisions in Egyptian history, though it would be hidden from the official record. He could not execute her, because to do so would be to confirm everything that she had said, would be to prove that the system was indeed built on the suppression of truth. And so he chose a different path. He would exile her, would remove her from Egypt, would ensure that her voice could not be heard within the kingdom. But he would spare her life, would allow her to live, would hope that in exile she would be forgotten. If you want a practical, step-by-step explanation of the path of knowledge we're exploring here today, I've created a complete guide to help you apply it in your own life. You'll find the link in the description. And tell us in the comments where you are watching from. We would love to know. The hidden daughter of the sun was exiled from Egypt, banished to the desert, forced to leave behind everything that she had known, everything that she had been. But in her exile, something remarkable happened. She did not disappear. She did not fade into obscurity. Instead, she began to work in secret, to preserve and transmit the knowledge that she had gained through her Eye of Ra. She established a hidden community in the desert, a place where those who were ready to receive the truth could come to learn, where the knowledge of consciousness could be preserved, where the Eye of Ra could be awakened in others. She worked with other initiates who had also perceived the truth, who had also been forced to hide their knowledge, who understood that the time was not yet right for the full revelation of what they knew. And she began to write, to encode the knowledge into texts and symbols that would survive the centuries, that would be hidden and preserved by those who understood their significance. She created a system of teaching that would allow the knowledge to be transmitted through the ages, that would ensure that when the time was right, when humanity was ready, the truth would be available to those who sought it. The hidden daughter of the sun worked in exile for many years, continuing her spiritual practice, deepening her connection to the Eye of Ra, expanding her understanding of the nature of consciousness and reality. And as she worked, she began to perceive something that gave her hope, something that sustained her through the long years of separation from her homeland. She perceived that the system that the Pharaoh ruled, the civilization that was built on lies and control, would not last forever. She perceived that there would come a time when the illusions would collapse, when the truth would emerge, when the consciousness that she had worked to preserve would be awakened in the hearts and minds of millions of people. She perceived that her exile, her sacrifice, her commitment to truth would eventually bear fruit, would eventually contribute to the awakening of humanity. She also perceived something else. She perceived that she was not alone in her work, that there were other women throughout history who would carry forward the same commitment to truth, who would use their own eyes of Ra to perceive beyond illusion, who would be willing to sacrifice everything in service to the awakening of consciousness. She perceived that she was part of a lineage of women who would work through the ages to preserve and transmit the knowledge that the patriarchal systems sought to suppress. When the hidden daughter of the sun finally died, she died in exile, her name forgotten, her existence denied, her contribution to the preservation of sacred knowledge unrecognized by the world. But her work lived on. The texts that she had written were preserved by those who understood their significance. The community that she had established continued to exist, hidden in the desert, preserving the knowledge, waiting for the time when it could be fully revealed. And in our own time, we are beginning to rediscover the work of the hidden daughter of the sun. We are beginning to understand that there was a woman who possessed the Eye of Ra, who used it to perceive truth, who was willing to defy the Pharaoh himself in service to that truth. We are beginning to recognize that her sacrifice, her exile, her commitment to the awakening of consciousness was one of the greatest acts of service that any human being could perform. The Eye of Ra is awakening again in human consciousness. More and more people are beginning to perceive truth beyond illusion, to see through the lies upon which systems of power are built, to understand that consciousness itself is the ultimate reality and the ultimate power. And those who are awakening to this sight, who are developing their own Eye of Ra, are being called to follow in the footsteps of the hidden daughter of the sun, to be willing to challenge authority in service to truth, to be willing to sacrifice everything in service to the awakening of consciousness. The woman who defied the Pharaoh is no longer hidden. Her story is being told. Her legacy is being recognized. And those who are ready to receive the gift of the Eye of Ra, who are willing to perceive truth beyond illusion, who are committed to the awakening of consciousness in themselves and in others, are being invited to step into their role as carriers of this ancient wisdom, as guardians of the sacred site that reveals the truth of all things. The Eye of Ra is opening. The hidden daughter's vision is being restored. The truth that was suppressed is being revealed. And in this revelation lies the key to the liberation of consciousness and the transformation of all human civilization. And if you liked this story, you will definitely love the next one that's appearing on your screen. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel, leave your like and activate the notifications. See you in the next one.